Again, thank you for coming. And we will start our second panel discussion. This panel discussion is focused on the energy efficiency and cooling. One of our panelists is going to be virtual. That's Mr. Ainsley Welch. And then we have Mr. Guillermo Rojo de Diego from TCL, CEMEX, Mr. Courtney Mark, former General Manager of Operations from TNTech, and Mr. Akin Lobi, who's the current president of the Trinidad and Tobago Institute of Architects. And we also have on a virtual member of a panel, Ms. Loreto Duffy-Myers, who happens to be or was the president of the Caribbean Tourism Association and is a very well-known person in the energy efficiency space in the tourism industry. Okay. Well, as everybody knows, energy efficiency is probably the low-hanging fruit of all the different areas in which we can address climate change and the reduction of carbon dioxide emissions. However, a lot of people may not be aware that also the design part of the building structure is also, call it a contributor to greenhouse gases, and therefore by designing proper buildings and good ventilation and good lighting, meaning natural light, we can also increment our fight against climate change and the reduction of greenhouse gases. So I'm going to pass the floor to Mr. Akin Lobi, the current president of the Trinidad and Tobago Institute of Architects. Akin, you have the floor.
Thank you very much to everyone, and for those that put on this I think very interesting discussion so far. I'd have to say that we come after panelists who before spoke about I'd say in particular issues of e-mobility, and I'm stepping back a bit to look at the whole issue of urbanization. Now, urbanization, and I'm talking about infrastructure, buildings, and the like, contribute to as much as 30% of 40%, sorry, 35 to 40% of greenhouse gas emissions. And it would really behoove us all, designers, I'm an architect by profession, to consider various methods of reducing carbon footprint. Someone in the last panel spoke first about looking at energy efficiency and reducing resource use, water as well as energy. And as designers and architects, we look towards some solutions that would fall in the realm of passive energy reduction. So how buildings are sited, the area between a glazing, glass, and so on to your walls, the use of materials, not just in terms of their insulation and thermal properties, but also embodied use of energy. Did we have to import these products from afar off? What was the actual energy cost or carbon footprint of actually producing these materials? Should we be considering local materials and the like? So that the passive component of it, but there's also reductions, even if you're using mechanical means of ventilation. And there's some cooling and heating mechanisms that are more efficient than others. So architects, your engineers have a very important role to play, as well as I would say those that have a responsibility for driving policies and incentivizing efficient designs and sustainability. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Okay. We now have Mr. Guillermo Rojo de Diego. I would like him to speak about more of what TCL has done to reduce their carbon footprint, which has been a remarkable job.
Thank you, and I would like to start acknowledging guilty because cement is responsible for 8% of the emissions in the world. So we do have a big responsibility in terms of the emissions. However, we all like to have nice roads, bridges, hospitals, schools. So in the end, we are all guilty of this CO2 generation. But the industry has taken it extremely serious and have committed to, in the case of Cemex, as one of the large global cement manufacturers, we have committed to drop 40% our CO2 emissions by 2030 and being able to have concrete neutral, so no emissions attached to that concrete by 2050, which is, concrete is after water the most used material in the world by humans, so that is a big number. So in the case of what are we doing and how are we postponing that to Trinidad? Well, we have been basically helping the architects have better product, better setup, to have more durable buildings that last longer, that isolate better from the outside. 2 years ago, we launched a product in Trinidad. It's called ECO. It uses local material, and basically what we do is we replace part of the clinker contained in that cement with admixtures and local limestone, which basically allow us to drop the emissions of CO2 by 20%. It looks a small thing, but when you multiply by hundreds of thousands of tons of cement, is something that is relevant and is impacting the emissions of the country. However, I was discussing with him as well, so what is the price of this product? And I say it is cheaper. Why is cheaper? Because it's eco. Because, I mean, why an eco product would be cheaper? It doesn't have to be more expensive. And we really have the commitment to drop our emissions, so that is why we are pushing it and making it more affordable for the people. But you know what? Even though we have reached 60% of the cement acquired in this island is now eco, because it meets the same strength standards that the Premium Plus, there is a lot of inertia in the people that build, because their fathers and their grandparents built with the same sack of cement. They don't want to change to a new sack of cement. So they don't care if there is more ecologic or more eco whatever. They just want to do the same thing that their parents did because the house is still there. So that's the one they trust. So we are on one side working in this product development. We're pushing these eco products successfully, but with a lot of pushback. And on the other side, our industry requires a lot of energy. We are big customers of NGC, and because we need 1,500 centigrades in our 150-meter kiln, big kilns, temperature inside the kilns. So that is 1/3 the temperature of the sun. Very, very hot in there. And that is a big flame, and it's just gas pumping there day and night all the time. So what we have been doing is we are shifting from gas to use waste, different kinds of waste in Trinidad. So we are starting with waste oil. We are in the process to shift part of the gas that, as you all know, there is some challenges with the gas supply these days. So we are trying to move as fast as possible to use waste oil coming from the vessels, coming from Kentucky Fried Chicken, coming from the cars, coming from wherever, all over the country. That is one, and in the long run, well, in the next 3 years, we should be able to use the solid waste from PFAN. We are working with Swimcol, the solid waste company, on a project. Many things need to change for this to happen, but I am sure we're going to get there. Because basically what we will do is we will separate the different, so the glass, the metal, the plastic, so everything will be apart. And we have the capacity to use 30% of the waste generated in the country in our kilns. So that is a huge source of energy. And that is renewable because people will always keep on buying their doubles and dumping the bag of paper and buying their things. And so that waste generation will continue. So we are shifting to that direction. We have plants in Europe. In Germany, we have our flagship plant in Rudersdorf, which consumes 85% of the energy comes from waste. So instead of having a variable cost, we have a variable income. So we have revenue on the variable cost side. We have a revenue because we go to an agreement. It takes time because there has to be a collection method. There has to be a system to separate the different waste, and there has to be a taxation process on the waste. That allows that treatment to happen. But the world is going in that direction. I am sure Trinidad is not going to be different, especially because the gas is not going to be unending. We need to move in a different direction. So we are just trying to be more than a cement producer in Trinidad, being more like bringing some additional values that our process can bring to the country. So we have a long way to go, but we have good experience to leverage on.
Thank you so much, Guillermo. And now we move to Loreto. Sorry, Loreto, I got lost in translation here. All right, you have the floor now, Loreto.
Thank you, and thank you for elevating me to the height of privilege, which unfortunately I never was. I have done a lot of work with Caribbean Hotel and Tourism Association, and I am a member of the board of the Green Arm, which is the Caribbean Islands Sustainable Tourism. But I wanted to talk at least I know I'm supposed to be talking about energy efficiency and cooling. And I have done quite a lot of work particularly in the hotel sector throughout the region. But in more recent times, I have managed a program called the Caribbean Cooling Initiative, which covered 5 countries: the Bahamas, Jamaica, Barbados, St. Lucia, and Dominican Republic, where we looked at cooling and refrigeration and the gases that are currently being used. And from previous information which we had through the CHANAC project, which is the Caribbean Hotel Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy Action Program, we recognized that 51% of the electricity used in hotels is going on cooling and refrigeration. And so with the result, we know that before we do anything else, we must become energy efficient in those areas. We also have recognized that the gases that are currently being used, while they were a lot more energy efficient and they are no longer harming the ozone layer, we do recognize that they have been contributing to global warming. So now we have to shift away to using the more natural gas. It's also actually, I only read this morning somewhere where it says that 20% of electricity globally is going towards cooling. And we know it's going to get worse because it's just getting hotter and hotter and hotter. So, what do we do? I heard a comment there earlier about pricing and design. This is something that I have been talking about for many, many, many years, that we've got to start designing buildings to take advantage of natural light, natural cooling, etc. Unfortunately, the hospitality industry does not quite agree and still insists that all the buildings look and see, because they do believe that the tourists, they only want to see the sea, they want the beauty out there. It's not, the other sorts of scenery just don't seem to have the same attractiveness, to tourists. So a lot of the time when you try to recommend to somebody that they consider maybe turning a building sideways. If you're going to lose the view, it's not going to happen. And it's very important. But I do agree that in the commercial sector is something that's incredibly important, and I do think that before we even start talking about renewables, we've got to start looking at how we can conserve energy, how we can become much more energy efficient, and considering now that cooling and refrigeration are playing such an important role and are becoming so energy, they're using so much energy that we've got to start really implementing some very serious standards of the equipment that we're actually bringing into the various countries. So I leave my contribution on that.
Thank you so much, Loreto, and I really apologize. I totally forgot about you. We now go to Mr. Ainsley Welch. Mr. Ainsley Welch is one of the best-known consultants in the area of cooling in the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. Ainsley, you have the floor now.
Okay, thanks, Ruben. First of all, thanks to the organizers for giving me the opportunity to converse at this discussion. It's greatly appreciated. So what I'll start off by saying is, I think at the last panel discussion that came before this one, there was a contributor, there were panelists that spoke about energy efficiency and energy conservation going hand in hand, and that's very, very true. It's applicable in this scenario as well, in that the energy efficiency tends to align itself with the cooling or HVAC plant and equipment, and the energy conservation comes from the standpoint of energy efficient buildings. And it's good to see the architects being represented by the President, Mr. Louis, because they, in conjunction with the MEP engineers, play a significant role in trying to conserve energy in buildings. The fact is that 40 buildings and construction activities account for approximately 40% of the energy consumed worldwide. And within that context, we in the construction sector are at the forefront in combating climate change and reducing carbon emissions and so forth. Similarly, if you're looking at cooling, taking that out as a subset, cooling accounts for, in a tropical environment, accounts for approximately 60% of the energy consumed in buildings. Loretta would have also touched a little bit on that in her contribution just now. And it's important for us, we have some constraints and challenges locally in the sense that our energy is extremely cheap. This disincentivizes clients from considering a lot of energy efficient plant and equipment, primarily because the cost is so cheap. The payback periods aren't great, and they are only interested in first cost as opposed to a life cycle cost. But certainly in what we attempt to as engineers to preach is encouraging more passive concepts, passive elements of design. As I said, it's good for Mr. Lee to be here, because sometimes as engineers, we are just handed a building and asked to provide cooling for it, as opposed to being an integrative approach between the consultants, so that we could start to influence the building architecture from the onset. The passive components, simple things like building orientation, or I just spoke to it a little bit just now. The building form, buildings with lower perimeter to area ratios, the optimum glazing to wall ratios. There's usually a conflict there between natural light and cooling, but there's an optimum ratio that can be utilized to get the best of natural light and minimize as much cooling as possible. So, those elements together with natural ventilation, thermal mass, types of materials that have very good thermal conductivities, etc. Those things are the normal natural considerations that have to go into any design process to conceptualize a building that should be looked at as the first line of attack in trying to conserve energy. Then you incorporate what we consider more the active elements, which is the plant and equipment, which are the plant and equipment, right? And you start to look at the more energy efficient types of cooling. In this scenario would be, in this scenario would be natural ventilation. There's also evaporative cooling that doesn't work too well in our environment because of the high humidity. But hybrid ventilation, the use of VRF systems, energy efficient chilled water systems, even other non-traditional elements like active chill beams, radiant cooling, displacement ventilation, that sort of thing. Loretta also spoke to the refrigerants, right? In 2023, the US will start to eliminate the use of R410A, which is still prevalent in our environment. And then moving towards more energy efficient refrigerants like R34, which also has a third of the global warming potential than the standard R410A that's there. It's also a more energy efficient refrigerant. So these are all things that we have to think about, and we have to work together as a design team, ultimately to assist in reducing or conserving energy, and also in terms of incentivization from the energy consumption side of things. That's something we have to look at more close. Government has to play a role, naturally, with all the subsidies and cost of energy and so forth. A holistic approach needs to be looked at in moving forward.
Thank you so much for that insight, Ainsley. That was really good. And now we pass on the floor to Mr. Courtney Mark. He's a former General Manager of Operations for the Trinidad and Tobago Electricity Commission. Courtney, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, audience present, those viewing online, and thanks very much for the opportunity to be here and to be allowed a chance to share from a utility perspective. Well, the value chain for electricity is well established in Trinidad and Tobago. There is the natural gas as the fuel input. There is the generation sector, and then there's T&Tech with the transmission and distribution sector. Efficiency may mean different things for those players. Of course, we heard before that NGC would like the efficient use of gas, but many of us may or may not be aware T&Tech gets the highest priority for gas. If there were to be a disaster of any type, the industries will have to be shed, and the grid will get priority for limited gas supply, and consumers down to the domestic level will be the very last to suffer any reduction in supply. There's some social and considerations, I guess, in that pecking order, but consumers pay the lowest price for electricity at that level. And it's well known that sometimes pricing signals shape consumer behavior. So there's a bit of a paradox in that in Trinidad and Tobago, like places like Suriname and Venezuela, I suspect, we pay just under 6 cents per kilowatt hour per unit of electricity. And many domestic consumers are not terribly concerned about efficiency in that regard. That consciousness, I don't think, has resonated down at that level. So the conversations about renewable energy, and so, you may be of the false belief that there are hundreds of thousands of people in Trinidad buying into that conversation and so on. Many people believe that gas, natural gas, is a birthright. It has come from Trinidad. That is our gas. And we are going to make sure that whoever lead us understand that is our gas. And that is our electricity, and we have to use it. It is from here. That's one of the realities. But anyway, in terms of efficiency, there are things that consumers and industrial users can do to be more efficient. And these are things that we have heard. I mean, the replacement of things like incandescent bulbs with LED bulbs and so. Everybody understands the efficiency of that. But the government actually funded a program in Trinidad to give each household 4 free LED bulbs. And there wasn't, I mean, some people took it, but they still have some of them there. You know, and you would think that, you know, in other countries, buying an LED bulb is a good investment because the electricity price justifies paying for it. You're going to save money if you buy it. And in Trinidad, you get it free, and you don't even bother to take it. So when you talk about energy efficiency at the household, and you talk about buying appliances with any energy efficiency tags and the blue tags, the blue star for energy efficiency and so, you know, I have no data to support how many people pay close attention to it, but I suspect there is a somewhat cavalier approach to those discussions about energy efficiency. People leave air conditioners running in rooms. I don't know how many times we've heard from the consultant talking about air conditioning and refrigerants and so on. I suspect many people put in air conditioners with little regard to the proper size of the room. I don't know how many of them are running down the use of inverter-type air conditioners for energy efficiency purposes. I don't know if the economics are worked out at the consumer level, how many people are so conscious. They may simply say, that just costs more, so I'm going to buy that other one. So they buy less efficient things simply on the basis of the initial out-of-pocket cost. At the commercial level, there are many things that can be done. For example, the power factor improvement to reduce reactive power consumption of the grid. That will reduce demand charges on consumer bills. Again, some companies have opted to go in that direction, not a big uptake. Again, the pricing signals don't necessarily force people in that direction. Load balancing, you would find that on many installations, if you check the phase currents on the internal wiring, it's not balanced, and that leads to inefficiency. At the grid level, though, I must say that TNTech has done a lot to strive for efficiency. The use of heat recovery steam generating turbines in combined cycle mode at the Penal Power Station and at TGU would see something in excess of 330 megawatts of power coming onto the grid with no additional use of gas. So I think that was commendable. Also, the use of higher transmission voltages to move power from down in Labrie onto the grid, 220 kV, means that the line currents are lower, so the losses on the lines are lower. Also, there would have been programs to replace high-pressure sodium lamps across the grid with more energy-efficient LED street lights. But there's still a lot of work to be done in terms of adopting smart grid technologies, using automated controllers, things like smart thermostats, dimmer controls for lighting, combination of sensors and so to reduce lighting levels if not required. Those kinds of available technologies are not being embraced here simply because the pricing signals cause behavior to be a certain way. So that is where I will probably end my contribution at this time.
Thank you so much, Courtney. And I have a question for the panel. Have anyone looked at the new materials that are being developed for heat reduction inside of homes and offices? because there's a film that is currently being worked on at the University of Colorado by 3 scientists, and this film actually reduces, traps high infrared waves and reduces the temperature of the room. So at some point, if that goes to market anytime soon, we may not be in need anymore of air conditioning units, because the temperature could drop all the way to about 23 degrees Celsius.
Yeah, I would have to say one thing. I was actually at the HIAC myself last week at the Amsterdam conference, and on numerous occasions I actually had to leave the hotel and go outside in the rain to try and warm up. I was numb with the cold, with the temperature. So I don't think 23 degrees is going to cut it really in Trinidad. I would think most, from what I can see, most of the time the temperature is around about 15 or 16. Oh, I'm not even sure that the bill would even go even halfway towards, giving the kind of temperature that you seem to like in Trinidad. It certainly would be of great use in any of the other islands because, the average home in most of the islands, with the exception of places like Bahamas and some of the wealthier areas of places like Barbados, most of the average homes wouldn't have air conditioning units, and they are used to natural cooling, especially in places like Barbados where we have the real benefits of the trade winds, and we can make use of it. But we have looked at a lot of those kind of things when we've looked at the exterior paint, and we've looked at putting in sort of natural well, for want of a better word, natural methods of trying to cool down the house, such as planting trees, shade, anything like that, in order to try to reduce the heat in the room. But I would welcome anything like that I think definitely would be able to reduce temperature, but I don't see it as being an alternative to air conditioning, to be quite honest, not with the kind of temperatures we're getting nowadays.
Fair enough. Thank you, Loreto. Has anyone ever tried the ceramic paint or ceramic incorporated into paint?
So not necessarily ceramic paint, but there are a number of materials on the market now that assist in reducing the thermal resistance into building spaces, from paint to the coatings on glass, to double, triple glazing, to the gas fill inside the panes of double and triple glazing, to different types of insulation, thermal mass, heavy construction. There are a number of different materials that facilitate that. What I would just speaking a little bit to some of Loreto's comments. When users of a space expect to be naturally ventilated as opposed to comfort cooled, the feeling of comfort, the expectations of comfort will be naturally adjusted, right? And then there are a number of thermal comfort theories. There's one authority on it by the name of PFAN who speaks about delineating and demarcating thermal comfort as relates to natural ventilation, for instance, relative to mechanical cooling. Naturally, when you're in a naturally ventilated space, there are certain behavioral things that happen. First of all, you're not going to experience low temperatures, so you naturally adjust your expectations. You start to dress differently. You're not wearing heavy clothing, so your clothing levels are significantly reduced. Even the activity in spaces, you adjust how you operate and so forth. So spaces that are naturally ventilated naturally attract a certain type of behavior from the occupants of the space. In terms of mechanical cooling, 23 degrees C is, you'll be surprised, is quite comfortable. What tends to happen is there's this perception that you have to get it down to 16 or 18. But we've done studies in some clients, for instance, where we've run it at 22, 23, and they believe it's 16. And they're quite comfortable, and it's really a psyche thing, but thermally, when you really balance on a body and so forth, you can quite easily feel very comfortable at 23.
Okay, thank you so much, Ainsley. Unfortunately, because we started a little bit after the time, we are going to give each of the panelists 1 minute to give their insight on what we can do on energy efficiency. Loreto, being the only woman in the panel, you go first.
Oh, thank you. That's very nice. One of the things that I have seen over the years is that I don't understand why men have to wear suits in the Caribbean all day long. We're talking about behaviour. One of the things, that I know that happened in Jamaica is that the minister decided that there was no need for the men to wear suits in the office unless they were going on official business. And I always notice when I walk into banks, when I walk into certain places, when you see staff having to wear sweaters, that tells me something is very wrong. And I think one of the things that we actually could consider in the day-to-day office situation is by, you could obviously raise the temperature significantly if the men took off their jackets. It's a very simple thing. The other thing that really does horrify me, though, I have to say, though, in Trinidad particularly, is when you look out the window of the high at night time and you see the government office with slightly dropping all night long. In the other islands nowadays, those, who are paying between 35 and 50 and higher cents a kilowatt hour, you can almost be fired for leaving on air conditioning and lighting like that. That's one of the things. Hotels everywhere nowadays have signs to say, please turn off the light, please turn off the air conditioning when you leave the room. In most places now they're actually putting in, they are putting in, backup house kind of equipment that turns it off the minute there's no movement in the room. But I do think that there are a few behavioural changes that we could make that could be a start before we start spending any money,
Thank you so much. I know Courtney was the last one, so Courtney, you go ahead and give us your final thoughts.
Okay, well, I just want to link electricity, air conditioning, and behavior by just giving two personal examples experiences that I had. My family, a pretty large group, was going to Grenada a couple of years ago for vacation, and we thought we would rent a house rather than stay at a hotel. And when we got to the house, the owner of the property went running around, pulling out all the air conditioning units, unplugging all the fixtures. And we said, well, we need to have air conditioning. He said, no, the rent didn't include air conditioning. And I know you Trinis will go to bed in the beach and you're going to leave that running all the time. And we said, well, all right, we're there already, but so we felt just uncomfortable just hearing that we wouldn't have air conditioning. And this house is overlooking Grand Anse and all the breeze blowing and everything, but culture and expectation. Second example is about 8 or 9 years ago, I had the opportunity to go to Japan at the headquarters of Marubeni for a board meeting. That was just after there was a natural disaster that impacted on some of their main generation, and Japan had to cut back and start up a lot of their inefficient plant. A lot of the simple cycle gas turbine plant had to run. And they had to schedule, Toyota and the big manufacturers had to schedule when they could use power. And the emperor by edict said, you all have to, across the country, reduce air conditioning demands. And we walked into the headquarters of Marubeni, and top executive of Marubeni, they all had their jackets off. The room was feeling a bit warm. And they said that they're comfortable, they're all right now. So they had increased just overnight, and they had to just operate at higher room temperatures. They conducted their business like normal, and that was just by one simple instruction. So I hope those examples make the link between electricity, air conditioning, and culture. Thank you.
Thank you, Courtney. Ainsley, your final thought.
Sure. So I would say for the construction sector, there's a greater requirement for an integrated approach, primarily between architects and engineers, to push the passive components of design. At the moment, those contributions, they contribute more significantly to a more efficient building space, primarily because they don't cost the users or the owners anything greater or significantly anything greater, as opposed to the active. The active components are important as well. Where they are required, certainly the use of inverter technologies and DC motors, brushless where they can, etc., would facilitate that. But more than that, the cost of energy, maybe on a commercial scale, for commercial buildings, needs to be looked at, because unless building owners have an incentive to look at life cycle costs as opposed to first costs, they're going to take the easy route out, because with poor payback periods, the suggestion is always, well, we'll kick that can down the road, and ultimately we by the time we're ready to replace the equipment, the savings that we have gotten by using more energy efficient equipment, we've not realized that, or we've just realized it. So ultimately, from a governance framework side of things, tariffs have to be looked at, particularly for commercial. I wouldn't include the residential for now, but maybe certainly some of the removal of the subsidies can be looked at. But certainly a regularization of the RSC has its own cutout with respect to that, to be looked at on a commercial scale, to allow building owners to be more responsible in their choices.
We have a question from the audience that is on Zoom in.
Yes, we actually have 3 questions, and I'm going to read them out loud. The first question or comment is, so many issues seem to be rooted in the fact that we import wholesale systems, concepts, and methods that are not meant for us. We see the negative impacts in every sector, from public health, the foods we eat, to personal care products, to culture. If only we would respect local as much as we elevate foreign. Okay, next one. This is now a question. Why aren't institutions like the UWI working on regional engineering solutions to these issues? Why do we have to wait on someone in Colorado? And last comment is, thank you, re-suits again. Caribbean business wear should not be temperate zones wear.
I don't know if any of the panelists wants to react to any of these comments. If
No,
not,
we can take an answer from the audience. Dr. King. Why isn't UWI working on some of these solutions?
Yeah, sorry, it is my fault that we are a highly inefficient energy consumer. I take full responsibility. I think UE is working on various solutions. I think one of the challenges I would say for the university is that the university really needs to have more industry collaboration around some of these problems. So that's something we're very specifically looking at. So maybe with TCL, if TCL is looking to convert its furnaces, there's definitely an activity there for the university in working alongside and supporting with some of the research aspects, because there are things like emissions control that you need to look at when you move in that direction. And I think it ties to the first comment about imported solutions. So are you now just going to adopt a European system which you implement in Trinidad, or is there going to be some local content involvement in the R&D activity? Because we have capacity and we have willing partners in the university willing to engage with industry on that.
And we do have very creative students and postgraduate students.
Absolutely, that's the resource really, especially if the industry is willing to help to finance some research activity in the university, that gives the option for dedicated resource to be applied to the problems.
Yes. Akin, your final thought?
I think we had a question, but I'd close off here. All right, so, some of the things may have been touched on before, but I'd say everyone has a role to play, so behavior, our own personal behavior really makes a difference in terms of, turning lights off, making decisions to purchase more energy efficient plant and equipment and the like. Looking at building management systems, Ainsley might have mentioned before that that the initial cost for this plant may be more expensive, but we need to give some consideration to that. Incentivizing good behavior may not be very popular, but maybe electricity should cost more, or maybe we need to look at tax incentives or the fiscal incentives to be able to invest in certain equipment. Smart building technology or building automation, that's sort of tied in with building management systems. So that could be done at a large scale or in single family residential situations as well. I'd close off with sustainable urbanism. So we're looking at the larger scale, larger than just buildings and siting of buildings and use of materials. So maybe we do need, in terms of land use, we're a small island nation, should we be getting more dense, building up, having more efficient use of infrastructure, roads, drainage, electricity, transmission of electricity, and the like. So if we actually start from a consideration in terms of smart or efficient and sustainable urbanism, I think that we could reduce our carbon footprint, not just from the point of view of buildings, but also transportation, which would have been mentioned before. So I'll end with that.
Guillermo, your thoughts?
Just to finish, I would like to share that the sense of urgency on this matter, no? Because we talk about the CO2, and we talk about the CO2, we talk about the global warming, and global warming is a big thing. This is not about the polar bears getting extinguished. This is about existence, and this is about our grandchildren. This is not about 10 generations from now. I mean, if we don't do something, the temperature of the globe is going to increase by, I don't know, a couple of degrees in 30 years, and what is going to be the size of Trinidad if the global warming increases by 2 degrees? What is going to be the size of Trinidad? Because the level of the sea is going to go up. So that has an impact tomorrow. I mean, this is something that's happening. This is not the luxury. All these things that we're talking about. I mean, from our personal responsibility where we work, we have a responsibility. But then as individuals, I am driving a pickup, but I would love not to have a car. I would love to have an alternative, and I don't want to have a car, but I need a car. I'm buying things that are local instead of bringing tomatoes from Florida, buying tomatoes from Parami, which is a suitable option. So this is urgent. I think each one of us has a responsibility on our personal life and our professional life. So I'm not talking about cement. I'm talking about urgency, and I'm talking about our ability to change things urgently because the matter is very, very critical. So that's my point.
I would just like to add one last comment. I don't know if any of you, anyone has been monitoring the temperature of the world, but there are a couple of sites that have been publishing that over 3 or 4 months of the year of 2021, we achieved that 1.5 degrees Celsius that we are so trying to avoid. So inevitably, we will get there before 2030. And everybody needs to be mindful of this, because we now have to prepare ourselves not so much to avert climate change, but to be more resilient, because the changes are here. They're happening now. When people went to Paris in 2015, there was a lot of talk and there was a lot of discussion, but seriously, nothing was really achieved. Some countries have moved forward, but most of the world has just remained static. They have just kept the status quo, and we need to do something as individuals and as nations. Thank you. Yes.
Until the time had passed, actually. He had asked a question to us here to respond based on the Q&A, and it had to do with energy efficiency and so on. So I wanted to make a point, really 2 points. One, to get meaningful change in Trinidad and Tobago, you could only do it in one or two ways. You have to let the price of electricity be where it has to be. That's the first thing. Of course, that's a very difficult and challenging prospect. Or you have to either instruct or mandate things happen a particular way. For new housing must have solar, and so on and so forth, right? Trinidad is one of those jurisdictions in the Caribbean that can technically afford to be renewable at the household level, but the price of energy doesn't allow it to happen. And I will quote one very simple example, and I'll mention this in my previous life in the public service, right, in a public company. I am part owner of a Jamaican Trinidad operation in solar, and so what I had done in my home, half my house is off grid, right? So that the concern about the law and integration with the grid and so on, you could manage that. So you come off grid, and I had indicated to most people, in my household uses normally about 100 kilowatt hours, right? It was about 100 kilowatt hours before I started. And to put solar in Trinidad and Tobago to reduce that would have cost more than the money I would save if I actually changed the equipment in my house. So I changed my AC units that I intend to use in the night, all right? And I changed my refrigerators to for example, inverter type. That cost was less than the cost of putting solar and associated battery, right? And even after that, I would put the solar in, and I remember the comments from my colleagues would be, "You have money." I said, my house is now 150% my requirements. I've installed it because that's the business as well. And I would tell somebody that cost me at that time 150,000 TT dollars. And most of my colleagues would be driving cars that would cost like $1 million. So it's a matter of, and then in the same conversation we're talking about, what is the economic justification? How long is it going to take? I said it's going to take about 8 years to pay back, 8 to 10 years to pay back. I said, but that's still better than leaving my money in the bank. Now that's the justification I have to use in Trinidad and Tobago context. If I was in Barbados or any other country besides Trinidad and Tobago, the payback is like 4 years or something like that. And it makes sense. But you can't have, this is the reality of Trinidad and Tobago. I have colleagues that say, well, was my payback? And I say, well, this is not going to be paying you back like that. But when there's a power failure, which is very infrequent in Trinidad and Tobago, we have power. When there's a dip and some equipment gets damaged, it's safe, because when your house on solar, for example, it's like one big UPS, basically. So the point I want to make is that we don't have that level yet of maturity in Trinidad and Tobago. The transition towards energy efficiency is going to be by those who think it's the best thing to do, not by those who have to do it. And I just want to make that point.
Thank you, Curtis. That was a very good insight.
Permit me, Ruben, just one other point in terms of behavior, right? So I agree, Curtis, that if you were to dive into the deep end and increase electricity rates, there's a certain shock and knee-jerk reaction across the society, right? Because the behavioral adjustment is going to be significant. But one of the challenges that electric utilities have is meeting peak demand. And that generally occurs in the night because there is the simultaneous use of electricity at the domestic level with the industries that run 24/7. And the infrastructure exists in Trinidad and Tobago where electricity is metered in real time. When I say that, the AMI, the metering infrastructure, the automated metering infrastructure, timestamps the use of electricity. So if you can reduce peak demand, it means you need not invest more capital in generation to meet peak demand in any form, renewable or otherwise. And the peak demand occurs in the night. So one proposal for thought is to implement a time of use tariff, which basically says, okay, we're not increasing electricity across the board entirely, but if you use electricity between, say, 6 in the evening and 10 in the night, your rate is now going to increase by 50%. That simple signal teaches you now something behavioral. But I will use the clothes dryer during the day. I'm going to do this later on. You know, I'm going to wash my clothes by hand and hang it to dry instead of using any little thing in a pricing signal. But you know what? It gives them an option now. So it's not across the board that I've imposed this on you. I can sell it to the public. I can say, but you know, you can control it. You don't have to use it at night. But what the utility benefits from is a reduction in the growth in peak demand, and it offsets the capital investment to put in more generation to meet that. So just a thought for consideration.
Yes. Thank you so much, Courtney. Yes, go ahead, Dr. King.
This ties right into what you're talking about there, Courtney. So if you were solely responsible for the RIC activity of setting rates for electricity, what rates would you set? And it might be a time-based tariff, but what, like in terms of cents per kilowatt hour, what do you think would be a reasonable rate for us to be paying in Trinidad and Tobago?
Right now, electricity, TNTEC has not been paying for natural gas for some time. And that, I think that's the only creditor. They're meeting other bills. But that represents about just over $1 billion a year in gas. And TNTEC needs over $4 billion a year to operate. That answers your question.
All right. All right. We have to leave it there because we are actually cutting it into our last panel, and we have a group of wonderful speakers for our next panel. So I'm sorry, gentlemen, but we have to leave it there. Thank you very much to all the panelists. You guys did a fantastic job, and thank you for being here.